Welcome, Innerspace Surfer. Today's episode fits into both of our ongoing series, Soul-Centric Biz Spotlight and Demystify the Mystical. Eavesdrop in on my chat with my Instagram turned real-life friend, Jaime Love. Jaime is a self-proclaimed, truth-telling, eternally curious introvert with a passion for all things natural, organic, neuro-psych, and healing-based. Her personal journey towards becoming a light and shadow alchemista began over 20 years ago when she birthed her 3 children and her first business, Jaime Love Photography. Through light writing with amazing photography clients, consciously journeying through motherhood, world travels, major physical injuries, grief, loss, and subsequently navigating the waters of CPTSD, Jaime was shown a path of liberation through the art of vibrational medicine, somatic-based yoga therapy, mindfulness meditation, and pranayama. Through the gold mining of her own shadows and deeply exploring human consciousness, Jaime received a deep calling from the universe to share the transformational tools she's learned along the way with others. Her work here on this planet during this time in history is to assist the human collective in elevating our energetic vibration and aligning our personalities to match the original blueprint of our mind, body, and soul. Jaime serves as a light shadow worker in this way and guides along your own unique journey. Grab a cup of hot tea or your favorite beverage, and let's tune in for my conversation with Jaime Love. Hey there!
Hello.
Happy Saturday!
Happy Saturday. It is a really beautiful Saturday here, actually.
It is, and you're in upstate New York, correct?
That is correct. Upstate New York.
Yeah. What's the temperature like today?
It looks to be about 20 degrees outside.
So way colder than here because we're going to hit like 55 today here in Prescott.
Wow. Yeah.
The sun, as you can see, is coming in, and it does sometimes get a little warm right here, so I may have to shift, but for now I'm soaking it up.
Yeah. I know. It's been we had a snowstorm not too long ago, and so I'm finally glad to have some sunshine.
Yes, we had a little mini dump, and then I saw like a couple days later you guys got double whammied, right?
We got like 2.5 feet. It was I'm still sore from shoveling.
I was just gonna say, how long did it take you to shovel your way out of there?
Thankfully I had some help from my children, but yeah, it took a while.
Good. Well, at least you got it taken care of. Your muscles are healing.
Yes, I'm in recoup mode at the moment.
Yeah, my boyfriend Steve was the same way, like, because he hasn't, been shoveling in a long time. And so the next day he was like, oh my God, my back hurts so bad. We were putting CBD rolling stick all over us. Okay. Well, let's hop into a little chit chat. So Jaime and I met on Instagram, and I was trying to think, because I thought it was shorter. Like I thought we had met during the time of COVID, which sounds like a book, right?
Right.
Yeah, probably somewhere it is. And then I kept looking back. I don't know why I was on there looking back at some older posts at some point, and I saw your name on there, and I was like, oh, we've been connected for quite a while. So then we decided a couple weeks ago to make it legit and hop on a Zoom and like meet for real. Yes. and get to know each other like more dynamically than just behind the screens. I mean, I guess technically we're still behind the screens, but
we're more little cubes and boxes right now.
Yeah, exactly. So walk us through your story, because we're going to chat today. So for the listeners, we'll just do a little prep. We're going to hear about Jaime and who she is. And in her first incarnation of my awareness was focusing on personal branding photography for soul-centric type business owners, which she is still doing, but has since evolved, probably like many also through the COVID situation. So let's go into the Wayback Machine. Give us a bit of who you are, where you're from, what you're about, and then we're going to have a nice little chat and learn about Bach flower essences, which is where a lot of your energy is focused currently.
Yeah, that is true. So how far back do you want me to go?
Maybe like, where did you grow up? What part of the country? That helps kind of, I think, give everybody a framework of sort of, values, beliefs, culture, that kind of stuff.
Totally. So I was raised in Connecticut, actually. I grew up in Connecticut, and it was just me and my mom growing up. And I, went to school. I was like the artist in school. I was like the superlative class artist,
Yeah.
and I went on to study photography at Ringling College of Art and Design. I went to college for photography for many years. I got out of college. I sort of kind of started a photography business. And then we're talking like, I'm dating myself here, but this is like in the 2000s here. And that's when all the digital stuff came out. So it made all of my equipment and all of my training sort of obsolete.
Right. That transition, because that transition happened then, right? Late
Yeah.
90s, early 2000s, stuff started
Yeah.
going more digital. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like right in the middle of that transition. And so I had a photography business kind of going. And then I ended up pregnant with my son. And that started me on a whole other level of, self-exploration as a mom.
So when you say that, what did it bring up? What do you mean by that?
Well, so usually when people, well, I'll say typically when people have babies, they're like, yay, I'm going to have a baby. It's going to be this wonderful experience. And yay, everything's wonderful and hunky. That's not how it went down for me.
It was a little more chaotic.
No, that's not how it went down for me. When I was 3 months pregnant, I developed Crohn's disease. My body freaked out. I was sick the entire pregnancy, and then my son's father abandoned us, and I was just left on my own to deal with
you were like, hey, lady with a baby.
Right. I was the lady with a baby. I was really stressed out. I was freaking out.
And you had no Crohn's symptoms before that. It just literally came on during your pregnancy, which is interesting because you and I share the Crohn's. And another person that I had worked with, his wife had Crohn's, but he said when she was pregnant, it was almost as if the hormones overrode it and gave her superpowers. And so she didn't have symptoms and didn't feel sick at all during her pregnancy and didn't have to be on her meds, which is interesting.
That's what happened in my second pregnancy.
Okay.
Interestingly enough.
Okay, continue.
No issues there. It's just like every kid is so different in what they bring through with into your body and into your everything. So yeah, when I had my first son, I was just a wreck. I was trying to figure out how to function and exist and manage this major debilitating illness. And that's kind of what initially led me to exploring flower remedies. I had gone to a doctor, and it was around the time my son was 18 months old. I finally was like, okay, I'm going to go, maybe get this looked at, I had already had it looked at. They told me what I had, but I was breastfeeding. And so I felt like I couldn't take any of the medicine or any of the stuff because I didn't want it to affect the breast milk.
And what kind of, when they diagnosed you, meaning I'm assuming traditional Western meds and docs, what did they prescribe? Do you remember what kind of meds that was they were trying to?
So they told me to take prednisone. And I said no.
Yeah.
And then I went back, 18 months later after saying no to the prednisone, and they said, it's so bad, we need to take a piece of your colon out.
Nope.
And I said, I'm 25. You're not taking my colon apart. Let me figure out what I can do about this on my own. And so then I started getting really serious about, the healing and not just being a breastfeeding mom martyr. Yeah. Which is what I had become at that point. I was very self-sacrificing for my son, So then, I started exploring flower remedies, and it was very fascinating to me at the time, looking at the different emotional spaces I was in and seeing how the patterns had created all kinds of discord in my system. So I started slowly unraveling that, all those puzzle pieces, and it's so multi-layered,
Yes.
So then, I did the flower essence therapy, and that was wonderful. I kind of got my life back on track. I met my daughter's father, and then, obviously went on to have her. And then thought everything was great. And then he ended up being incredibly physically abusive. So then I found myself again solo parenting, but then like with 2 kids. And then my breaking point, my literal breaking point, that really catapulted my healing journey was when I was in a car accident. So maybe if it was actually only a few weeks after the like the major abuse incident had gone down and he was like out of the scene, I got rear-ended by a huge truck, and it basically broke my hip in 3 places.
Oh my God.
And I ended up bedridden for a good 6 months. and it was during that time that I really had to look at what was going on in my life.
Yeah, because the universe was sending you some pretty big, literally like ramming into you.
Yeah, like everything, like all root chakra, like, hi, look at all your safety and security and all your issues. Like, so it was during that time that I, ended up studying to become a Bach flower practitioner, because the way my brain works is like, how do I word this? Like I wasn't content to just sit there, like I needed to do something about it. And I needed to evolve my life in a different way. And I was exploring the flower remedies through my own practice. And so and they're so potent and helpful for me energetically through that experience. I mean, I feel like had I not had my plant allies, then I might not have gotten through it with as much grace as I did.
I love that you call it that. So, and the other thing that's interesting too is the juxtaposition, I guess, of like such physically violent, chaotic things happening, and these apparently on the surface, and I can't wait till we hear more about them, right? More gentle, allies, showing up in your life to help you walk through that part of your journey. And then the other thing that I'm curious about, and I know you and I touched about it on our solo call a couple of weeks ago. So how are you getting through this? Is that when your mom came in to help you?
Yeah. Right. My mom took a leave of absence from her work, and she came and she stayed with us for probably like 4 or 5 months until I was able to walk again and be like a functional, actually doing the work of care, like physically caring for a 2 and a 5-year-old.
But kudos to you for opening up to not, and I'm sure, there were moments, right? But not falling down the downward death spiral of doom and victimhood. You literally couldn't physically get out of bed. Your body was tore up. And you had 2 little kids and you were on your own, and you were still trying to sort out, your spiritual, emotional, all of the layers of that. And then like, how am I going to support myself and these children? And what is that going to look like? Right.
Yeah. Well, that was a piece of it, was like, oh gosh, I didn't know when the accident happened, like what my recovery was going to look like. I'd gotten a lot of different prognosis, from like, you might always have a limp, to like, you're not gonna be able to carry heavy things ever again, to like, oh, you'll be fine. It was like a very wide gamut. So, in my mind, I was looking for different ways to potentially make income and to survive and do something that I love, and, work from home. I've always been a homeschooling parent. So having a business that I could do from home was always really important to me. And helping people in general, in the many different ways that I do. And I tended to always be that friend that people would call me with all of their stuff. And I would just help them unravel it.
Ditto.
In this very like practical way. And so it was a very natural transition to becoming a Bach flower practitioner, because it's sort of what I naturally did on its own, but now it had this beautiful framework and these ways of helping people. So I went through that experience. I came out of it a Bach flower practitioner with a lot more self-awareness, a lot more patience than I knew that I was capable of existing with. yeah, it really changed my life in a beautiful way.
And so for you, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, like, whenever some kind of accident or eruption happens, you know, even in the moment when it was happening, when I was sitting in the car, I was looking in the rear view and I saw the truck coming and I knew it wasn't going to slow down. My thought was, okay, universe, what is this? What is this?
Wow.
What is this here to show me?
Yeah.
You know, so I always had that awareness that I'm about to be taught something.
Yeah, that's a pretty big lesson.
Yes.
So I'm curious with the flower essences and on your journey with them as healing allies, as you call them, was it like a longer, slower evolution through that? Or were there moments of like you started working with one specific flower and there was like an immediate, you know, shift or awareness or illumination? How did that work for you personally?
So, you know, the first time when I had my son, initially, when I first started using the remedies back then, I was also working with a therapist who was like, she was a psychotherapist. I was going for counseling to work through the grief of being abandoned and all of that. And she happened to also be a Bach flower practitioner. And so every week I would go in for counseling, and, you know, and at the end of it, she'd give me a bottle of remedies.
Very cool.
And I was like, and I noticed back then that my transition out of that like victim mindset, or like that really bogged down, I'm a single mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
My transition out of that was like, boom. Like it just, like I just got out, like it just
shifted.
It just shifted so quick, and I attributed it to the remedies. And so I'd say that it was a combination of remedies,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very specific to what I was going through at the time, the different emotional states I was in. There was definitely particular flowers that were like definitely my flowers, like what I would call now like a type flower. You know, everyone tends to have a type.
Mm-hmm.
But there were also catalyst flowers that like worked as a catalyst for me.
Yes.
So it was a combination of like a bunch of different things and being present with whatever was coming up in the
Mm-hmm.
moment. And then as I went on later to become a Bach flower practitioner, I have all the remedies now, and they're just there at my disposal. And so, you know, if something's coming up, I can just, there we go. Just take like a little bit here or there.
And are they tinctures? Or are there different ways, like teas? How do you actually ingest them?
So let me show you real quick.
Yes, please. Yes.
Here's my arsenal here. They come.
Look at that. It's like so for the people who can't see you right now, it's like this traveling briefcase kind of. Yeah.
It's like a traveling case with all of these beautiful remedies in there.
Yes.
And basically they look like tinctures, right? Like in a bottle.
Little glass bottles. Are they amber bottles?
They're amber, although they can be blue, as long as they're dark, just to help keep them preserved, you know, so the light doesn't get into them too much, which is why they're in a dark case as well.
Yes.
So yeah, basically it's just, you know, a flower essence that's put inside of either alcohol or glycerin to use to preserve it. So you can take them by putting some in your water. You can put them in a room spray. You can put them in your bath. You can just like pulse point them. You can put them in your lotion.
So sort of like an essential oil.
I mean,
kind of.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the way that you ingest.
Yes, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the transition from more photography as of late into this, and then give us a lesson, school us on some basics?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'm trying to think about where I left off in my story. Oh yeah, so the car accident, and then my
Yes.
mom, and then I'll like quick fast forward. I went on to have another child after that, and have a very harmonious co-parenting relationship now. And I was in a subsequent partnership that ended kind of in a really intense, dramatic way. Again, flower remedies for that. How do I word this? So my transition from photography to flower essences. Well, all right. So I had my photography business, and that's been going all throughout all of that. And the flower essences, back when I became a practitioner, I'd done some trainings. I'm a Bach flower certified trainer, so I can train people to actually I can do level 1 training. So I can teach people about the essences and things like that. I had been teaching some classes, but there wasn't a ton of interest locally here with the people in my town, because I don't know, I guess, I don't know why. There was interest, but there wasn't like a ton. It wasn't financially sustainable, I would say. And so I leaned more heavily on my photography business. And then, COVID happened and it is happening. And so then I started being like, everyone's moving their business online. I probably could reach a lot more people online with my flowers. And it's something that I had been using on my own. And in my photography business, I do work with, soul-centric entrepreneurs doing branding photography for them. And oftentimes I would post like very spiritual-esque type quotes and stuff on my page, which I think is how we connected on that page initially. You're like, oh, okay, we're on the same page here.
Well, and I was like, can you come take pictures of me? And you're like, I'm on the East Coast.
That's like, well, I would come, but COVID,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, basically I just decided that my more spiritual side, this flower essence, yogi part of me needed its own space to be and breathe and expand. And that I wanted to, keep my photography separate from my more, spiritual side. Not that they're all interwoven ultimately, but, I just wanted to keep it like,
have their own spaces.
It needed its own place to grow. And, not everyone who likes my photography necessarily cares about flower essences.
Right. So they're different energies. They're different operation.
Totally different worlds. And so they needed their own space. And so I created my own space for it. I created the Instagram page, Elevated Alchemy Life. It all came to me just one night. I don't know. I was sitting there. I was like, this baby needs a place to grow and breathe. And so my previous business, when I was doing the Bach flower therapy, it was called Wise Flower Healing. And that was my business. That was my soul, my business name. But then I had dissolved that over the years because I wasn't doing much with it, and I just kind of let it. And then I was like, this needs to come back in a different form. So I recreated it. I also, and that's a whole other podcast interview, but I also completed a yoga teacher training through this COVID experience, which was a pickup from where I had left off right before my car accident. Right before the car accident, I was in a yoga teacher training as well. So, it was kind of a revisiting of everything I had done and recreation of the space. And now I am able to reach everyone in the world who's interested in flower essences or who looks up flower essences. They find me. People find me on Instagram, and now I have a bigger reach, and it's more of a sustainable business that's flourishing in a beautiful way. So I feel like both sides of me get to like stand in who they are and like do their thing.
Yeah. So I love that on so many levels for so many reasons. One, this podcast is sort of one of those things for me, right? Where COVID sort of, I think, has given those of us who are tuned in. So I love many, many moments there you talked about intuition without using the word intuition, right? Which is another layer to this podcast that I want to make sure I'm weaving through, because so many people aren't aware that that is what they're hearing or that's what's coming through. And maybe want to start something, and whether or not it's even a full-fledged business, maybe it's a creative project or endeavor of some sort. And, hearing you talk about your story, you've listened to that internal voice as it's come through, and even picking up the multiple modalities throughout your healing experience as well, and trusting, oh, it's time to step back into the yoga, or it's time now for the flower remedies to come back, but in a new way, and another iteration of that, giving it some new life, breathing new life into it. So there's so much juicy soul-centric business evolution in there. And also, tuning into your intuition. And when you said it came to me one night, what is that? Let's just go a little there for a second. What does that look and sound like for you? I know how it is for me, but everyone's experience is so different of how we hear it, and then whether we acknowledge it or not, and then where you kind of go from there.
So for me, I was looking, I used to think in like black and white terms. It was like, I have to do this or this, this or this, right?
Me too.
I didn't see how there could be room for both. And at one point I was talking to a friend, and I was like, I knew I needed to offer flower essence therapy on the side again. And I actually put it on my photography page as like a service. I just threw it on there because it needed a place where people could book.
Sure.
And then I started thinking, like, what's the common thread here? Like, why do I do both? Why does all of this speak to me? And I was like, it's all about light. Photography is all about shadow and light. Flower essences are all about shadow and light and working. And I was like, oh, I work with shadow and light. Like, that's my life purpose. That's like why I'm here.
Yep.
And so when I started looking at, well, how did this come through me? I feel like I've been through a lot of shit, right? I've been through some shit. And like in the shit, in the muck of it, like being in those shadow realms, like learning how to integrate the shadow, learning how to work with what's showing up. It's a form of alchemy, and so it just, boom, it came to me. And then the elevated piece was like helping elevate people, their vibrational frequencies, helping elevate myself. It was just like, get up out of the funk, like that was the whole point of it. So then that's sort of how it was birthed. It literally, once I had the name, my kids laugh about this. They woke up the next morning and I had my website done.
Wow.
I stayed up all night and I was like, there it is. And it just like, it all downloaded. Yes. And then in the morning, they woke up and I was like, look at this website. And my son's like, Mom, you like just busted out a website in one day.
Yep. That's how it works.
I was like, yeah, it just came through and here it is. And
you just gave birth to it just like that.
Just birthed it out.
Mama had another baby overnight.
Right. And as it was happening, and it had been churning and cooking in my brain for a while, but it just came through on its own. And now here it is. And I'm so grateful. I get to meet amazing people. And
I love that. Yeah. I got woken up with a download last night too about a post that I need to post on Instagram. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I have my phone notes like that. I just will open up a new note and just kind of, and half the time I'm still in like that in between in the theta state. And so it doesn't even always make sense fully, but there's usually a word or two that I'm like, okay, that was the thing. Yeah. Go back there. Yes. Love those.
Too.
Yeah. Love those downloads.
Like how do you constantly, like come up with content, right? And I'm like, it's not content. These are just things that come out of my brain. Like,
yes.
They're downloads. It's not like content. It just cracks me up, right?
Yeah. There's a whole, Elizabeth Gilbert, do you know the author Elizabeth Gilbert? She wrote Yeah. So, and Big Magic, which I love her book, Big Magic. And she even had like kind of a pseudo podcast. It was on YouTube. She just did audio recordings on YouTube of her kind of coaching people through parts of the book. And she talks about that that ideas and everything's just like in this cosmic soup, you know, upstirring kind of in the cosmos, and it wants to find a host. And so it'll tap somebody on the shoulder, and if that person doesn't take action on it, it'll go bounce somewhere else. So I'm glad that you let it come through. And now I feel like this is the perfect segue to talk more about the flower allies and how that all works. I'm curious to have like a little mini lesson.
Sure. So, gosh, all right. So I guess I'll just start by saying, you know, flower essence therapy is a form of vibrational medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It works on an energetic, subtle body / emotional body level. You know, if you look at the different koshas of the body and the different layers, it's not like the mental level. It works on the emotional layer. It works on the auric layer.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is, you know, I'm sure you've probably heard of the map of consciousness levels, where there's different emotional states that vibrate at different frequencies.
Yes.
Well, you know, flowers vibrate at a very, very high frequency, you know, up in the 2000s. So like even they say enlightenment is like somewhere around 700 to 1,000. Well, flowers are up in like 2,000 range.
So they're
like
extra
1,000.
special.
Yeah, they're like their own entities.
Yes.
That have their own divine cosmic intelligence. And you know, so basically Dr. Edward Bach is a brilliant man. And this was back in the 1930s that he developed this. He had sort of studied with Hahnemann, who is the creator of homeopathy. So it kind of, it's similar to it works similarly-ish to homeopathy in the way that, you know, you get dosed with like a tiny micro amount of the essence of something, and it helps your immune system, or, well, in homeopathy it works with the immune system, but in Bach flower essence it doesn't work with the immune system, it works with the emotional layer vibration.
Yes.
And so it jolts it enough to kind of like raise the level of the vibration of the emotional state of, you know, the energy frequency in your auric field. So that's like that's like how they work. And so Dr. Bach is like also a very intuitive, he was a very psychic man. His life work, so this is what I find fascinating, is that he used to be a doctor. So he was a doctor, he had a regular doctor practice. And then he started observing how people would come into his practice, and they would, you know, no matter what the physical state that they were in, there was like an emotional component. There was like grief or fear or anxiety, or, you know, there was all these different threads. And so he started really getting curious about the psychological threads of his clients. And then he decided, well, what if I don't even look at the physical symptoms? What if I strictly look at their emotional symptoms, and I just treat them based on their emotional state? So then he was like working with Hahnemann and developing, you know, what these bowel nosodes, and that's a whole other conversation. He was doing a lot with gut bacteria back then, and like the gut brain link.
Wow.
And this was before any of this was even like it is, you know, like we know about it now.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he basically, he started psychoanalyzing his clients, and he came up with like 7 categories of emotional states. There's fear, there's uncertainty, there's like insufficient interest in things. There's loneliness, there's the category of oversensitivity to other people's influences in particular. There's despair. And then the other one is like over caring about the welfare of other people. So he noticed how any of these 7 categories within that, there would be a multitude of emotional states that could cause somebody to go into a state of dis-ease. And so when he started looking for ways to, you know, get these people out of these funks, he naturally, I think it was said like he was out hiking one morning and he saw the dew on like a morning flower, and it like came to him. he observed how he would react, because he's very intuitive. Like, he
Yes.
would react to, the flowers and being in the presence of the flowers. And so he started just experimenting and saying, well, what if I capture the essence of this flower and give it to my patients? I wonder if that will happen. And then all of a sudden people started getting well. He was working with them on the emotional level, and people started getting well. And so then he, started experimenting and creating all these different things and doing all these notes, and developed his 38 remedies that he
I
has.
think this is fascinating, that the time period you said, because I don't know about you, but it sounds like, I clearly we're cut from similar cloths in a lot of ways, especially the Crohn's, like that's just one of many of the layers, right? But I'm sure you've read, this journey that we're on requires a lot of reading, right? So we've read all kinds of different books. It does seem like there was a lot of downloads coming to people from like the late 1800s to the 1930s. There's a lot of spiritual, sacred, intuitive healing writing that came through then, right? So it's also fascinating to me, because to read about history, you would be like, and how did he approach his clients and be like, hey, I'm not going to treat you for the thing. Take this flower essence, like how much of that was he even, I'm curious, right? Probably revealing to them. Like he probably was keeping it maybe a little more on the science-based side.
It's interesting. I don't know specifically, but
right.
I do know that there was a lot of different perceptions about him. Like some people thought, oh, he's lost his mind.
Yes. Well, like, because when you opened when you opened the briefcase or the case with all of the bottles, the first image that came to my mind was during that time period, or a little earlier than then, right? When people would roll into town with the horse-drawn kind of carriage with the medicine cabinet that would open, right. And some people were all about it, and other people were like, they're snake oil salesmen, right. And so, and there always is, and there still is today, right? There's still people today that are like, all that stuff is done. And it's like the CIA released documents that, we're multidimensional beings and we can astral travel and all this stuff. How is it still? Oh, that's
why is this in question anymore?
It's higher evolved, that stuff's actually the way we're divinely designed to tune in and tap into this. So it's just fascinating though, that time period, that era where it seems like a lot of stuff was coming through, and it's just been iterations of that since then. And
well, as the technology has expanded, then they're able to expand on the knowledge. So now, with the gut brain health, now we have all these instruments that can measure how the gut biome does affect the brain, and it does affect our thoughts and vice versa, and how that all works. Back then it was more they observed, they could like Bach could observe how that would, but there was no way to like measure it. So I think the way that things are being measured now is fascinating, and even with the Bach flower essences, something I'm interested in exploring to further my awareness is just through Kirlian photography and the way that they photograph the essences, which I don't know if you've heard of Kirlian photography.
No, tell me all about it.
It's aura photography. It's a way that they can, measure the light frequencies based on the photons that are coming off of different parts of your body and fingers, and different ways that they measure that. And there's actually this amazing Russian scientist, I can never pronounce his name properly. It's Korostikov. I don't know how to say it.
Okay.
But he developed this amazing instrument called the BioWell, which they've been doing a lot of studies with, that measure the light frequencies before and after meditation, before and after flower essence therapy, before and after. They're like, so then now they're able to see like the effects of these things. And so cool. Now that we'll be able to measure these things, then people can't say that, they're crazy.
Right. Well, because there's so many people who are like, proof, I want proof. And it's like, well, what actually is proof also? Because there's tons of things that have come about and we think we have proof, and then another evolution of it more information, more data is gathered, and it's different than what we initially thought we had proven. So I guess I'm more fluid and flexible about proof. I love that too. So I have had an aura photo before, and then now, I don't know if you're on the TikTok with the kids. I say kids, but there's plenty of people our age on TikTok. There's a whole spiritual TikTok. There's a witch TikTok. There's all kinds of versions of TikTok on there. But there's an app that some people are using that does exactly that, where it kind of looks like an aura around a person's body. But if you hold up a pen, there's nothing around the pen. But if you hold up a crystal, then there's an aura around the crystal. So they'll hold up, you know, live living things that have auras and energies. Yeah.
Isn't it sad though that we need these instruments to tell us that these things are alive?
Right. Yeah.
I feel like we've stopped like just tuning in.
Well, and it's funny because I have my crystals, they just speak to me. It's interesting. Like I've even taken crystal courses to learn about them, and it's like I don't even honestly need all of that. I just, you know, there's certain ones that resonate with me. Do what?
Just try them out.
Yeah. There's certain ones that are just like,
with anything long enough, you'll understand what's happening.
Yes. Yeah. And they're little magical, mystical creatures. They're so amazing. And I've had visions and dreams about being in the caves where it's like the giant, you know, crystal pillars and stalactites and stalagmites and whatnot. And then you see the pictures of these mines that they discover, you know, in Mexico. And it's like, oh, those are real. Those are real places. And, you know, so it's so interesting. So, okay, what else do we want to get into about the actual different, I know we can't go through all 38, but maybe let's play with a few. I know you posted a post about aspen, and I said I wanted to learn a little more about the quaking aspen energy, because here so I'll just jump in with a little personal part on my Crohn's journey. So I am still taking pharmaceutical meds. It has been a dance. Physically, obviously, I still haven't done my whole podcast on that, and I will. But right now they're managing my symptoms. I have quality of life that I did not have for the 2 years that I was violently, deathly ill. And I'm still exploring all of these other modalities, which I did a whole deep dive when I was super, super sick, which really, some of it couldn't even get through it because it was so amplified and so noisy, right? Like it's almost like it's just flared and you have to let it take its own
thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like an angry storm within you. And I was just like, I just need to like back off it a little bit. So all that being said, you posted this post about the quaking aspen. And part of what has been on my healing journey, I knew was moving here to Prescott. I was living in Phoenix for 10 years. The overstimulation of the city, one, my job, which I had come to realize first. And then two, I realized I needed to get out of the actual city. And I loved Phoenix. I had a great community and I loved where I lived. It just got to be too much stimulation. I started to realize like how sensitive I actually was empathically and picking up so much of this frenetic energy that was going on there. And then it came to me that I need to move here to Prescott. And it came pretty quickly once I realized I needed to go. And then the aspen are up here, and the quaking aspen specifically are everywhere. And I love when I'm outside going on walks or hiking through the trails in the mountains up here. And I have been so drawn to them. So when you posted your post, I was like, oh, I resonate so much with what you were saying. So maybe share that one as a jump off point.
Yeah. Well, every flower essence, some of the flowers come from tree buds, right? So they're not necessarily flowers. You know, every flower essence has its way that it behaves in nature that sort of mimics what's going on in our energetic system. And so with aspen in particular, if you look at an aspen tree, it's not just one single tree. The root systems are actually intertwined, and it creates this whole, you know, subterranean network that communicates with one another. And a web, basically, yes. And so one leaf will pick up on a wind or like a vibe, and it'll start, their leaves shake, and they have a very distinct sound. They're like this, right? And so, but when one part of the tree or the system starts to do that, it sends a signal, and then the whole, so like you'll be in an area, and then all of a sudden the whole thing will start shaking. And so, you know, it's fascinating because aspen as a flower remedy is used for, it's in the fear category. And it's for when you have like unexplainable anxiety that you just like feeling like this uneasy, apprehensive vibe, something bad might happen. And like, they're not really, you're reluctant to talk about it. So oftentimes this is seen, I work a lot with children, and often these are the kids that have night terrors or they like things coming up. And it's what I find more often than not is that these children or these adults or any of these people are very telepathic, and they're picking up on something that nobody else is aware of.
And it's not their stuff.
And it's not their stuff. And it gives them this uneasy feeling. And so, you know, that's the Aspen as a remedy, is to sort of antidote that, to like bring back in your sense of like, oh, okay, I can relax into the moment. I can receive what's being shown to me, but that's not mine, and I don't have to take it in my body. You know? So that's like one example of like how a flower essence works and why it works in that way. It's definitely a fascinating remedy, and
That's so powerful.
Yeah. So, and even like there's a remedy called mimulus. Mimulus is also in the fear category. And it's also, you know, it's a very yellow flower. And so it has like this brightening effect, you know. There's different flowers have different effects in the way that they bring different energetic vibrational awareness to us.
Is there any that specifically seem to show up more frequently as a like, hey, like for me, so like with the crystals, right? Like amethyst always. So clearly there are elements of amethyst that always help soothe, calm, lighten, whatnot for me.
I'm moving my camera because I might have to plug in my phone here.
Okay.
Technological things.
Yeah.
All right, let me just plug myself in here. I'm switching the scene here.
Yeah. This is what we deal with in 2021, right? Well, 2020, but
I just don't
real-time tech stuff.
Real-time tech thing. Ooh, okay. All right. So, you know, there are definitely remedies that the Bach Center keeps track of. That's like, what are the #1 sellers? You know, and it's interesting to see what the #1 sellers are depending on the year. And I always find that fascinating. But one of the #1. Sorry, I'm like trying.
That's okay.
Is it okay if I tip this way?
Yeah, take your thing. Yeah, take your time. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the #1 flower remedies is walnut. And walnut it's called the link breaker remedy. And I don't know if you study any like pagan things, but black walnut hulls are often used in like energy breakage, like when you're trying to cut cords with negative entities. You bathe in the black walnut, which is interesting because I don't think that Bach was like at all tuned into that. You know, he was from the countryside of England, so I don't think he was tuned into that necessarily. But I think it's fascinating, the common threads, right? And so walnut is considered a link breaker remedy, and it's used specifically during life transitions. So if you're going through menopause or pregnancy and you're having a hard time with the integration, you know, stuff like that. So that's a very popular remedy. Another really popular remedy is Star of Bethlehem, which is it's the remedy for trauma. You know, it's the remedy for anyone who's gone through like a big T or a little T. You know, trauma is subjective. We all experience trauma in different ways, and so you know, it kind of restores it. It's like this energetic restoration. If you look at the flower, it's like a 5-pointed star, and it's like this holy star, and it's like, oh, and you can feel it. You know, you just feel it.
I don't think I know. Like, I'm in my mind going, do I know what one of those looks like? I don't think I do.
Yeah, I don't have a picture.
That's okay.
of her.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
But it's for trauma. It's for grief. You know, stuff like that. Incidences, losses. car accidents. That was what I took from my car accidents. And I definitely felt personally like, you know, like when I say allies, like if you have an energetic ally, I don't know if anybody who's ever had healing work done, energy healing work, knows that feeling when you feel like a presence of something that's there to help you. It's just like you feel it in your system, and you can't describe it. It's not like they did this thing and then I felt this way.
Right.
It's like, okay, something shifted.
And that's back to the conversation we were having before, where I think there's so much about like prove it and thinking mind and mentalness and intellectualizing and analyzing. And it's like a lot of this stuff is feeling energy stuff is feeling stuff, not thinking stuff. Right. Yeah. When you shift your energy, it can trigger creative ideas that are more thought-based, right? But like first it's tuning into and tapping into your feeling circuitry.
Yeah. And there's a big thing. It's, you know, with any, and this is what I find fascinating about this system in particular, you know, there's 38 remedies and everybody can experience some level of trauma, but how and why and the emotion that's attached to that trauma is different for everybody. So like you and I could have the same exact trauma, same exact thing. We lived in the same house, but maybe you internalize it to mean I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. Or maybe I internalize it, you know, that I become overly strong-willed and I'm going to fight against it. You know, like we all have these different soul paths, these dharmas and these different samskaras and these different levels of why we're here, you know, our dharmic path. And so I find this system really fascinating to work with because it's so unique. Right. Yes. And I wrote a post about this recently. You know, there's a lot of people, there's some people out there doing flower essence therapy that have a lot of they'll create combination remedy formulas. They'll say like willpower in a bottle, you know, or they'll say, you know, you'll just any of those number of things. Right. Yes. And then they'll put these remedies in, you know, that say they're for that thing, but I really don't advise blanket remedies in that way because how one person interprets their willpower is so different. Yes. And the layers of emotion related to that are so specific and unique that those kinds of, and there might be something in the bottle that you don't need, you know, that could trip off something else energetically. So I don't recommend those, but, you know, it's really a path of self-awareness, like learning what emotions do come up when you're triggered, when you're not triggered, how you want to feel vibrationally, and getting into alignment with that.
So walk me through, if I come to you as a client, which we've already talked about, I can't wait to explore and find out who my allies are. Walk me through that sort of like intake. What is that initial experience like? How do we get started? Yeah.
So generally when somebody comes to me, the first thing is like, well, why, what's going on for you that brought you here? And sometimes some people very like, I've got Crohn's. I've got really bad arthritis that's making me crazy. You know, it could be a physical thing. It could be an emotional thing. It could be that they're just going through a really hard time in life and they just need like a boost, you know? So I'll check in with them and see like what specifically is going on. And then I ask a lot of questions. It's like, okay, well, so that's going on for you. How are you taking that? Like, how are you interpreting that? Like, what does that feel like in your body? You know, where do you feel that in your body? When you feel that in your body, how do you react? So there's a lot of deep questions that get asked. And a lot of it's intuitive for me, you know, like based on what I'm picking up on from a person.
Yep.
You know, I can feel things. I don't really put that out there, but I pick up on things, you know, I can tell when certain, and I have a way of asking questions that really gets to the core emotion because there's so many layers of emotion, you know, so I like to get to, well, what's really tripping you up in the moment? And so then we, you know, from there, some people, it's like, okay, there's just like one or two remedies that are screaming out like, hi, can we come hang out?
Put me to work.
Right. I'm totally ready to hang out with this person.
Yeah.
And then other times it's like, whoa, okay, there's so much going on here. So let's figure out what's the most important. What do you really need to focus on?
Mm-hmm.
What's the most important thing for you to focus on? And then we'll work with just those. I don't ever, give more than you're not supposed to ever give more than 7 remedies in a bottle. I rarely give that many.
Mm-hmm.
I usually start people off with like 2, sometimes 3,
Mm-hmm.
just to start them off and see what shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they'll take the remedies for a period of 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how often they take it. And that's intuitive up to them. It's recommended to take 4 drops 4 times a day, but I tell people to take it when things come up, like when your shit's getting stirred.
Yes.
Go ahead and take your drops. And then we reassess in 2 to 3 weeks and see what's shifted and see what might have come to the surface as the result of that shift. So where somebody comes to me and they're upset about something and maybe it's showing up as fear, that's the surface level emotion. But then 2 to 3 weeks later, it's like, actually, I'm just really freaking angry.
Mm-hmm.
Fear
and anger have a love-hate thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then 3 weeks later, they're like, I just want to cry. I'm like, so much grief, like this, it just all comes down to these layers, and you work with whatever emotions at the top layer, and then you work your way down. So that's how I work with people.
And how long can that last? Is it different I'm assuming it's different for everyone, but typically, on average, what is that experience? Is it a month? Is it 5 months, 6 months?
Right.
How long do you work with people?
I've had people that have come to me and they literally came once and they got their remedy and that was all they needed and they're good.
Wow.
Like I had this one woman who was struggling with addiction. And once we pinpointed where the emotion where it was coming, she took the remedy and that's her remedy. And now she knows she goes and gets it whenever she's triggered and she's good. Like done.
Wow.
Right. Similar with children are really receptive to it. Sometimes it just takes meeting once or twice. And then once they feel the difference in their energy field, they're like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
Some people it's ongoing. I have a couple of clients that I've worked with for a couple years and they just are really doing some deep soul work. And it really depends on the client and the layers that they're willing to look at and work with. I've had people, they're good, and then they come back to me 3 years later with something else.
Sure. Yeah.
So it really depends on what's coming up for the person.
Yes.
It's some people, I have a couple people who are on my like once a month program.
They get a little tune up.
We have like a once a month check-in and then we just see what's going on and I re-up them and they just have their personal room sprays that they have in their rooms. I have one client who has her personalized car spray. She does a lot of commuting.
Yeah.
And then so it really varies.
Very cool. So I'm trying to be aware of our time here too. Okay. So we don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole. And I know you and I loosely touched on it last time we talked, but I feel like it could be a question that people who are listening may have, because there's so much talk now and it's so open as far as other plant medicines like ayahuasca and psilocybin. And how does Bach flower essence and Bach flower remedies differ from those types of experiences?
Well, they're not going to knock you over the head.
You're not going to have an Alice in Wonderland experience?
No. Although, maybe. So it really is dependent.
Yeah.
Well, that's just me personally. I won't say that. I've had, slightly psychedelic experiences with flower remedies, but it's not like on the visuals, not in the typical way, but more on the energy level. Like you're like, whoa, okay, all of a sudden I can feel everything. Like once, you know, once the blockages are cleared, the energy can channel and move through in a different way. And then
Yes.
you just feel different. You have heightened awareness. And so some people have reported side effects like that, but usually it's because their perception is more clear. But I would say in general, you know, flower remedies are very subtle. It's like a very subtle, some people don't even feel anything. Like they won't feel a difference. But then when I interview them like a month later and I ask them, oh, so remember we talked about that thing? And they're like, no, what are you talking about? Like, I'm good.
Just deleted the file.
Right. just deleted. So they didn't even, but they weren't aware that it was shifting.
Yeah.
Right. It can be that subtle. Whereas I feel like, you know, ayahuasca or psilocybin is very, you know, you go in with a very specific intention and the plant medicine shows you something. It shows you what you need to see, and it gives you this big download, right?
Yes.
You're like, oh, I'm one with the universe, right?
Right.
Whereas, and that's beautiful. Whereas flower essences, I would say, are more for like the householder that doesn't want to travel to Peru and hang out with a shaman, but wants, you know.
And it truly is like what you're saying, what microdosing, right? I mean, it truly is, you're not taking this hero dose. You're like working it through your day when you're feeling, oh, maybe something. And even in that, it's helping people tune into their intuition more. Like when you feel the thing coming up, rising up, you know, for me, I went through this whole cycle back in 2005 and 2006. I had a major sort of dark night of the soul experience and like my first kind of spiritual awakening. And it would come physically into my throat. Like I would just out of nowhere have this wave of emotion. Heat would rise within me. I would feel like I was like all this nausea and it would just stick in my throat, which was obviously a ton of stuff about speaking, you know, using my voice and speaking up and all of the things. But I think even those things, like some people don't connect with, that's an emotional thing that's coming forth, you know, or a trauma trigger, or something like that. So I love the intuitive kind of more fluidness of what you've described. And
and what I love about flower essences is there's really no side effect. Right. So where in ayahuasca, you know, you're going to puke, you're going to like not be able to be functional for a day or longer. Whereas with flower essences, you're not going to be tripping.
You can still go to work.
You're going to just feel a shift or not feel a shift, but some shift will be occurring. There's no side effects. Like you can take it alongside with medication, you know, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that with, let's say, something else, you know? There's no major side effects. They're safe for children. Even with people who have like a history of alcoholism, there are glycerin-based ones, so they don't have to have the alcohol ones. I'm really cognizant of that. It's just very subtle energy medicine, and it doesn't, it's not going to knock you over the head, like I said.
Yes.
But you might, you know, some people do report what I call aggravations. And when I talk about aggravations, I mostly mean emotional aggravations, just like in homeopathic medicine, you know, anything that needs to come out of the system rises to the surface to be healed.
Yes.
And so sometimes, you know, an aggravation will occur. Like maybe you'll have an aggravated emotional response. And it's like, oh, wow, okay, maybe there's something under there that I wasn't looking at. You know, some people have reported aggravational types of things, particularly when there's like catalyst remedies that are designed maybe to provide that sort of
poke the bear, so to speak.
But even them is very subtle. And it really, my experience is that it's all about how receptive you are to it on some level too, you know, like the receptivity and your willingness to receive the frequency and the energy of what they're providing you. Is pretty profound.
Well, thank you for sharing so much about it. If people want to find you and learn more about how they can connect with you, and also learn more about, I'm assuming there's potential links also to go down the internet rabbit hole, but where can they find you and book a session or email you or contact you and get in touch?
So they can find me on Instagram. I'm on there, elevatedalchemy.life. That's my Instagram handle. And then my website is elevatedalchemy.life. You can find me on there. You can book a session there, see what my offerings are.
And I'll definitely put all this in the show notes. Is there a book or a website that has more information about Dr. Bach and the history of it, or where, because I'm very interested in exploring some of those things too, just from an interesting, want to learn more about that.
I highly I'm a Bach flower certified practitioner. I highly recommend going straight to the source, which is the Bach Center.
Mm-hmm.
The Bach Center, they offer classes with trainers, people like me who teach classes. I am going to be teaching a class in the springtime. I don't have the details ironed out yet, so I don't want to say too much about it. But I go through the Bach Center. You can find practitioners that are either local to your area. They have a whole list of practitioners. I work with them specifically because the people who are on the practitioner list are dedicated to preserving Dr. Bach's legacy. They're not, there's a lot of people out there
that are going rogue.
Bach flower practitioner, but they don't use the word registered practitioner. So that's something to note, actually. If you're looking for a practitioner, make sure they're registered through the Bach Center, which is based out of the UK. It's in Mount Vernon. It's the actual house where he made all of his remedies and saw his patients. So it's a really special place and really special, amazing people. And the gardens are still there, and it's all still intact in this beautiful, beautiful place. So I highly recommend, learning through that avenue, and their website lists books that are, specifically endorsed by the Bach Center, that are the ones that are most linked to his specific work. So there's lots of people who have come after him that do their own thing.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm a little bit more of a, originalist or whatever the word is, right?
Purist.
Purist. I go to the source of where the information came from more so. And I just feel like the integrity of
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
The integrity of the people. Yeah. The integrity of the people at the Bach Center is really top notch in a way where it's not just some money, there's all those marketing schemes. I just ooh.
Well, and the integrity of the remedies, right? Like you said, there's a lot of people that are hybriding and going rogue and kind of mixing and combining things. And so if people are interested in this specific type of, modality, it keeps it.
What I love about, and I was going to show you, on the Bach, if you get Bach flower remedies, they have on the side of them lot numbers, and there's a number, and they can trace it back to literally what year and what flower in what garden and who picked it. That's the level of integrity these people have.
Yes.
In terms of the quality
very
control.
Cool.
So
that just made me think, totally off topic, but it totally made me think of that episode of, oh my gosh, what, Portlandia? Did you ever watch Portlandia with the chicken?
I love that episode.
Oh my God, that one and Put a Bird on It are my two faves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm on that one too.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been so much fun.
It is kind of like that.
It is, right? Yeah. Which is good. We want people who are the keepers of the flowers and the essence and the spirit. And I love all of that. So, well, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours and hours, right? Which we will off of this for sure. I'm excited to begin my journey, and I'll keep listeners, I'll pop in from time to time with updates. I'll link all of your stuff in the show notes, and the Bach flower. I don't know why I keep saying block. Maybe there's something there.
There it is. Blockage.
Yeah, but I'm so grateful that we finally hopped on a couple weeks ago, and we've elevated it to this platform, and now more people. That's really what I'm called to use this podcast for, is to just expose people to different potential rabbit holes of their own to go down and explore. And it's fascinating that in all of the kind of spiritual and healing work that I've done, that I didn't even know about this. I hadn't come across this yet. So I guess it was just the right divine time for me to have it drop into my awareness and share it with everybody else now. So I'm excited.
I love this. I'm so glad you're doing this. I feel like it's really a beautiful thing to connect other people who are doing different modalities and like learn about each other's craft. And I've learned so much just listening to your other podcasts so far. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. I also love, I've had a few people leave reviews, but I've had several people DM and send me messages and say, this has really helped also because, even on the business side, right? Like nobody really knows what they're doing. Like everybody's just figuring it out and stepping into it and trusting intuition. And so that's the one area of focus that I really want to also continue to help people trust and nurture and understand how to hear that and what that sounds like for them uniquely. And then to step into whether it's a creative project or moving or relationship stuff or whatever, but just, we already have all of our answers within us. You know, we think it's somebody outside of us, and it's us, and we can access that. So
true.
Thank you for trusting your own intuition and stepping into this next level of work for yourself.
Yeah,
and I'm happy to be in your orbit and to continue to watch this journey unfold for you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, have a good rest of your day.
I will.
And we'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Take good care. So much good stuff today. I hope Jaime's journey, both the things she's personally overcome and the grace with which she's continued to be an explorer within her own cosmic's inner space, inspires or awakens a new curiosity within you. I hope you enjoyed learning more about Bach flower remedies. I know I cannot wait to work with Jaime on the next level of my own healing journey. Jaime and I will most definitely have a follow-up conversation after I join forces with my own flower ally team and uncover what each of them has to teach me. You can find Jaime online at elevatedalchemy.life or jamielove.photography. You can also follow her on Instagram at instagram.com/elevated.alchemy.life. Be sure to check out the show notes where I'll go ahead and link up all her information and the many resources we discussed during the show. Thank you so much for sharing your time and space with me today and for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the Cosmic's Innerspace podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. I'd love to stay connected with you. On Instagram, you can find me at cammyk.com. That's KAMMIEKDOTCOM, where I share a lot more Cosmic's goodness on Insta stories. And I'm at cammyk.com on Facebook. And of course, we can always stay connected via the Cosmic's Innerspace Mothership over on the blog at cammyk.com. Okay, until next time, friend, I'm sending you stardust